I really want this to be sort of like a conversation, a roundtable discussion, if you will, about how to build platform applications, answer questions people have, hopefully answer any concerns people have or anything like that. Talk about my experience, what we've done at eBay to some extent with that. I don't have any slides. I wasn't planning on showing. I don't really have anything I can show. We could look at some platform code if that's interesting for certain things, but I really just wanted to sort of talk through the ideas, like the more concrete details of what the platform is, what we're trying to do with it, and address any questions or concerns or anything like that. If that's not what you're into, then please go find your next best option. And no hard feelings, honestly. So, with that, and a little dose of caffeine, let me kick it off. So as I said in my keynote, everything that I'm engaged in, everything that I'm doing is really services first, right? So at eBay, we've got two main applications that we're working on with the Joomla platform, and Bob alluded to those this morning. One of them is the Data Hub, and the other one is eBayinsights.com, which we call Project Compass. In both of those applications, you can think of it as starting off building a service application first, right? So we built a RESTful JSON service application, and I'll use Compass as the most recent example, where the eBay Insights application is for getting analytical data. It's sort of like Google Analytics for commerce, if you will, right? The notion is that you can get insight into what's going on in the marketplace, what's going on, how you're doing versus competitors, that kind of thing. So as you might imagine, huge amounts of data behind that. Given the volume of data that we have at eBay on transactions and that kind of stuff, even, limiting the dates down to like a 30-day range, it's still hundreds of millions of rows, in some cases probably over 1 billion rows in a couple of those tables. So just massive amounts of data to trudge through. So what we did was create a service application that allows you to get summarized data, summarized analytical data, time series. So for these 30 day points, here are your that being the x-axis. What are the y-axis coordinates for all of those, right? For lots of different metrics, lots of different data sets. We also have services to obviously create accounts, link eBay IDs, all sorts of things. But what it forced us to do was think first, in a lot of ways, about what the application is going to do and build that out iteratively. And then we had a separate team building out the web interface. And these teams were independent but worked obviously in concert. So the web application is much more JavaScript centric, as you might imagine, right? It's not, there's very little that the PHP side of the app is doing. Really, it's just spitting out HTML that JavaScript acts on, right? So containers, if you will, empty templates that JavaScript then calls services to get data from and populates the page. So it's a big shift from the way Joomla is built and designed, right? Joomla is a system that's designed to, you send in a request, and it goes through and does everything all at once, compiles it all into one template, and spits out a page, right, at a time. And the way these things are designed is you send a request, and the first thing to come back is like this sort of shell, right, the empty template that may have a couple of little things in there that we know about, like your logged in name, right, because it's sessionized. But outside of that, it's just got containers, and you run AJAX calls off to get all of the other data that you're gonna need. It allows us to asynchronously do things. It means we can stack up stuff. We've got a cluster of servers on the server side, so it obviously is going to load balance between those, and it really makes it easy to build it out in a way that can be reused. So one of the secondary goals, if you will, of that project is for other teams within eBay to leverage the same data, the same data sets. Well, if you just build a website, then that's only going to go so far, right? But we wanted to make sure that the service layer allowed these other teams to consume this data and present it in lots of different ways, right? Maybe there's internal dashboards, maybe there's no limit to what can be done with it, right? To be able to understand how people are doing in the market. There's account managers that obviously are going to want that kind of information. So it's fairly broad in possibility. And by building the services first and making sure that we cover all our bases as far as functionality, it made it to where you don't have to go back after the fact and build those things in, right? All of the use cases that you have for this site, at least in our case so far, encompass what we would ever need to do with it externally.
So is there like a class and an API for each of those services, or how does that work?
That is a fantastic question, and it drives into, and by the way, I would love to have that kind of interaction. If you have questions, jump in with them. That is the reason that we submitted the new MVC code, right? Because each service in our world maps to a singular controller, right? Each task. So in the 1.5.1.6.2.5 whatever mentality of Joomla CMS world, a controller encompasses, in a lot of cases, an entire component, right? You can have multi-controller, but that's even a little advanced. In a lot of cases, you've got a singular component that's got an edit task, save task, checkout task, and so on and so forth. So for a service-based application, what we've done is there is a controller for each one of those tasks, and it is atomic. So when you execute this controller, if I execute the save user controller, all it knows to do is save user, and it's going to get the appropriate model. It'll do whatever it needs to do, and it performs that task. So we route all service calls directly into a controller. Answer your question on that?
It's a save user controller. So there's like a save, and then the save user is
I was using human speak, not code speak. So in code speak, let's say that my namespace, if you will, my prefix for this application is Mark, right? So it might be Mark controller user, and in this case, it's probably update or create. So what we did with the RESTful router is there's four principal verbs, right? There's create, update, delete, and get. And those map in the router to post, put, delete, and get, right? So in the RESTful sense, when you post something, you're updating it, or creating it actually. And there's a mapping to all of those things. So the router is designed so that it will, by convention, pick up a certain controller based on a certain name.
Would it be possible to show an example of this controller? Or is that
yeah. Does anybody have a dongle? Of course you did.
It's gone.
DVI or VGA?
VGA.
Whoa.
Actually,
What
I
just
don't know.
happened?
No.
It's rebellion.
Here's one.
I can't imagine.
Do you need power?
Okay. No, I'm sure good.
See it.
You gotta figure it out.
I don't think we're connected.
Hmm?
I don't think we're linked up.
Are you running that in the lab?
Oh, no, that's
The
just
projector's
a
not
read.
on?
I think you just need that if you're going to read, right? He doesn't
Well,
need
if he
the
wants to
lab.
see the screen on the feed, yes.
Well, I don't care if I see it here, but we might
Yeah,
want to see it
yeah.
there.
Is there a projector button in the back or something?
Not you.
That's it right there.
Hey Jim, you want to see?
Hey, there were more seats down here in the front.
So I said it was a projector panel, but I didn't say it would actually help.
Yeah, so I don't know what to do with
There
that.
might be a switch, I don't know.
If you develop a whole thing that's complicated, switch it
Yeah.
to projector.
I mean, it's a fairly small MacBook. I don't know if everybody will see. Yeah, I don't know.
Go ahead, try to get the presentation done.
That's awesome. So how did you get it to work? Andy?
Well, it took us a while, but we did get it to go.
Oh, there it goes. Warming up.
Mark, you made it! Yeah, right. Nothing is good than anything I
You might want to make your speed real bright.
Well, I don't know that it's anything to do with me. That's gonna have to warm up.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Okay, it'll warm.
So
It was,
It looks pretty good.
yeah, it looks pretty good.
Please clean filter.
Yeah, it said that last time.
It's been there.
Mark, can you clean the filter? Yeah, I can clean the filter. I gotta go get my tools.
I like that new full screen.
all right. So this is a repository that I've been working on called Tester, and what this is our pull request tester application for the Joomla Platform, and I've started working on it as a RESTful application, right? So I can walk you through how this thing is structured. So we have a web application, and I've used the prefix PT for this pull tester. And it's got load database stuff and loggers and all this kind of stuff. But this is really where it matters. So what I've done here is I've put a routes.json file in my configuration folder, right? And that JSON file is simply a hash. It's a key value pair of route pattern and controller, or controller name, right? So I read that in to maps, and I set a controller prefix PT service, set a default, add the maps right here, and then execute the current route. So that's all the magic that's happening there. So if you look at that routes.json, that's all that it looks like. So you can see here the /hook/ colon event type, where event type is a variable. It routes to the hook controller. CI notification routes to the Jenkins notification controller. Date routes to date, right? And that's all that it takes from that point of view. So then if you look at our controllers, which I have to drill back through. So service. So this is our controller tree, right? And so hook, you'll remember, I've got to create here, right? So PT service hook create. So PT service means that it's a service controller, right? Because that's the prefix that I set. It extends JController base, so it's very, very vanilla. There's not a whole lot to it. And hook is the name, and then create is the suffix, and that is the mapping to the RESTful verb, right? So in this case, it is expecting this will get executed if you post to /hook or / whatever it was I had it mapped to. And so in here, I'm doing a bunch of crap to set up model state and whatnot, but essentially the gist of it is I'm in this execute function doing everything that needs to be done when you put or post to that particular route. I've started a convention here with putting markdown descriptions of the service response and request. So for Jenkins, we've got a Jenkins notification. Same thing. There's a put. So, or a post. I keep saying the wrong thing. But Jenkins will post to this particular URL, and then we capture it and do whatever we're going to do with it, right? And because these things are atomic, we can very easily chain them together if we want to. We can do any number of things with how you organize it. They can be executed asynchronously, right? So it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you actually structure things, and certainly how you can reuse code down the line. Does that answer where you're coming from? Cool.
Views. How are you doing views? Are you doing the filling up inside of controller, or are you using the view?
So as yet, I'm not really using the views for this stuff, because a view is essentially, it's just JSON and code is essentially what I'm doing, right? Now, I can think of lots of different ways that we may tackle views, but I got to be honest with you. The way I'm seeing things nowadays, I don't have much use for views anymore, because I tend to think it's best for us to handle all of that stuff on the client side, as much as is possible, right? We can render things out and perhaps through a service spit out some HTML here and there, if that makes sense. But from a data portability standpoint, from a reusability standpoint, I don't want to, as much as it's possible, I don't want my service to spit out HTML, because I don't know yet what Android application I might write, what iPhone application I might write, that I want to consume that same data. And if it's in HTML, that means I have to strip it back down again. I have to figure out what the markup means. I'd rather just have data in a serialized format. JSON is as good as any, and go from there.
Oh, that's not the partial templates, which is the one thing we do.
Right. So we do use, and again, that's on the web application. On the web application side of things, which is not exactly this, we have services that spit out partial templates. And it's its own namespace, if you will, of the API, and that allows us to pre-render things on the server side. And sometimes that's really, really helpful, because you don't always want to render everything on the front end, but you want to have the data available as much as is possible in a sort of free-form state, right? Or at least that's my way of thinking. You're all entitled to your own. Yes, sir.
This code can be called from plugins, for example.
It could be, yes. So the thing is that the way the CMS is structured, everything is very sort of strict about where you execute things and where you put things, right? And one of the things that I really wanted to do with these atomic controllers is to stop thinking about them as just controllers, right? You'll notice in the name of this thing here, it extends JController base because that's the pattern that it's using, but I didn't call it a controller, right? This is a service class, right? And if you look at another set of controllers that I've got in here, I created a set of commands, right? And so the main command one, PT command, extends JController base. But these are command line controllers, if you will, right? The syntax for this thing looks like you would call tester space the command. And it has a router that basically says, well, go find the name of the command that's there, be it install, help, reparse, test, update, any of those things, and execute that. And there's no reason that a plugin in the CMS world, right, couldn't execute any of these, because the only requirement is to have an input object that you can populate with whatever you want, right? Either what came out of the request or whatever makes sense to you. It's not looking in a global place anymore. So you're not polluting like the global request space for anything. You've got an encapsulated object that you can say, well, for this, the input is blah. And just run it. what's really neat about this, and one of the things that we've used on the Data Hub, is we have this whole other application. So on the Data Hub, we have a service application, we have a web application, we have a third one. And this is, Bob was alluding to this earlier as well, and that is our scheduler application, our agent, if you will. It's just a daemon running in the background. But what's killer about it is we have a database table that basically has a controller name and then a serialized input. And this thing just runs like cron, and it just, as long as it's got resources, it just keeps running through, and it pulls things out of this job queue and executes them. And it's as simple as instantiate this controller, unserialize this input, stuff it into there, and execute. And you don't have to worry about, like, well, you know, what was the actual request that came in? What was, you know, what are the environment variables around it? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it happens in a plugin or an extra application somewhere else. All that you care about is this nice little input piece of data and the name of the controller to execute, whatever it's called. Yes, sir.
I'm more of a DevOps guy. I'm trying to place what you're talking about, sort of an entire ecosystem, especially in the high-performance world. So you're talking about JSON encoding stuff, and a lot of the guys that I know are moving away from that to just do everything pure JavaScript client and server side.
Yep.
I'm trying to place what you're doing. Are these different ways of doing the same thing, or would you say that they're just separate goals altogether?
How are the clients and services interacting? It's most likely JavaScript, or JSON if they're using JavaScript. JSON is JavaScript standard documentation.
So they're just passing arrays back and forth?
Yeah, so you can think of JSON as just serialized JavaScript. That's what it is. It's just that most languages have a serializer and an unserializer built in. PHP is one of them, right? And I can't speak specifically to the implementation, but my suspicion is that he's right, and that is that what your guys are doing is very, very much like what we're doing, right? Where most of the client-side stuff is all just pure JavaScript, right? And you're just passing data back and forth. And that data is probably serialized in JSON because in JavaScript, there it is. It's just an object, right? There's nothing fancy to it. You just eval it, essentially, right? So that's probably the case. There may be some other transport or something that they're using, but it would be very similar. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
How I see it is this is a server kind of thing. You can ask, you can put something to it, parse something to it, and you get something back. How would you implement security or authentication in it?
Great question. So, authentication is obviously important, very, very important, and there's lots of different ways to do it. One of the big focuses for me on this is to get a real solid OAuth implementation available. Because for service applications, OAuth is as good as you're going to get for right now. You can use basic auth, right? So the same sort of like HTTP auth that you type in and use your password to get, and that's easily supported. But OAuth is a much better way of doing it. It just means it's a little more complexity because you have to store like clients and credentials and all kind of stuff and figure out how to do that. This application, I haven't worried with it because there's really nothing privileged at all about it, and I'm not allowing anything fancy, right? There's nothing that anyone could just like hijack this and do other than kick off another build, and honestly, whatever. If that's how you get your kicks. But so internally, what we've done with our new project is we've implemented, actually Ian, who, there he is, followed up on a lot of the work that I did on OAuth and actually made it work. Thank you, Ian. An OAuth server implementation, right? And it's OAuth 1 because 2 is still in the ether a little bit. Everybody's got their own flavor of it. But it's a fully baked stack, you know? And so we've wired that up, and most of the work I had done sort of out there before, at least in the research and stuff. And he, like I said, he kicked its ass and made it right. But that's where I see this going, right? Like GitHub is a perfect example. GitHub is a fantastic platform where everything that they do is service first. Like as you browse their website, it's all driven by services. You don't think of it that way perhaps, but every part of their web app, every part of their actual website is driven by RESTful services. And because of that, they have this really, really powerful, immense API that's available, and you can view their documentation on it. It's killer. It's like, it's something I aspire to. It's really, really, really good, and you can do almost anything that you can do in the web interface, actually probably more, you can do through the API. And they offer two primary ways of authenticating, right? There's OAuth, and there's basic auth. And those are really the standards right now. There's lots of different things that we can do, but I think if we get those nailed and get those into the platform and make it very easy, that's something we've been striving to get at. Then we'll be set. Awesome. Any other questions?
On OAuth,
yes.
where is that in process? Is it anywhere that we can see code on it?
I have a branch in my Joomla Platform tree,
Yeah.
I think. Many branches. OAuth. So, if you look in here, OAuth. 3 months ago is the last time I touched it. But, so what I've done here, and this is actually pretty cool, I created, oh, that's actually not my latest version. At any rate, I created controllers for you in the new controller paradigm that essentially will handle the 3 main endpoints that you have to create for any OAuth implementation, right? And these are for interacting with credentials. One of them is to create a set of credentials. The other one is to authorize them. And the last one just does that last handshake to convert it into something that you can use for actually authorizing requests. And the beauty of this is these are designed so that you simply extend this into your own controller space and it just works. Like you don't have to write any code or anything like that in the simplest case, right? There may be a couple of things that you have to do about figuring out how to let a user authenticate into the website. But that's about it. And what I believe Ian finished for me was we created an extension of JApplication Web, the web application class, that has it built in. So you just extend that instead of JApplication Web, add a couple of configuration things, call a couple of things slightly different, but mostly exactly the same, and you get OAuth built in. So hopefully we can get that wrapped up and put out in a place for people to look at it and use it soon.
I'm building a REST
cool.
API, and I'm halfway through doing my OAuth provider. So
nice. All right. Well, when we get that out there, it'd be great to hear whatever critiques you have or thoughts you have, and we can get that polished up and put in there because it's critical. Like the service first mentality that I have, like this is of critical importance that we get this out there. And if they ever decide what OAuth 2 is actually going to look like, I'm happy to work on that too. But for now, it is what it is. I don't want there to be a Joomla flavor of OAuth 2, right? Like Google's got theirs, Facebook's got theirs, everybody's got their own. Once we settle, good to go. Yes, sir.
Where can we find best practices as far as building on the Joomla platform? Obviously, Joomla CMS, it's well documented, but how to organize things, what classes?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a weakness in some of that stuff.
Okay.
I mean, realistically, so what I would ask of all of you, if you're going to get involved in, please do. We've got this under docs in the Joomla platform. We've got this manual, ENUS, which actually should be ENGB, but we've got this thing, and there's a fairly good introduction to what's going on here, right? And quite a bit on how we've structured things. Now, by no means complete, right? But it's a start, and it's all in Markdown. So if you wanted to help, all you have to do is jump in and help. Like, edit this, help us out, figure out how we're going to do things. And because it's Markdown, it's really, really easy. There's tons of free editors out there to even preview it for you, right? But just please help. As far as what we have, so we actually have an MVC chapter that describes the new stuff, right? And it's got some information, and like this talks about like the old versions, interfaces, a couple of usage examples here and there. So as I browse through this, like you get an idea of what's there. It's not done, we need lots of help. But this manual is where I want that to live. I want it to live in this place because it's tied with the code. We can evaluate during pull requests, make sure that all the information is there. And because it's all in here and it's in Markdown, I've got fantastic converters out to lots of different formats, right? Cool. So Pandoc can take this and turn it into man pages. It can turn it into Word docs, PDFs, any number of things. And this is, I mean, there's obviously the API docs, right? So you can get api.joomla.org and see that. But usage examples, this is where you want to be. And some of it's really good, some of it's not as good. Like the GitHub package is fairly well documented. Thank you, Ian. With just the basics of how you interact with it. There's the keychain stuff, which we just added in, which actually has pretty good documentation on how you would go about using it, what to do. The commands for OpenSSL to generate your certificates, lots of that kind of stuff. So there's some stuff there, but obviously we need a lot more. And as I build these things, and this is the beauty of it. We're on the ground floor of it, right? This is what's going through my head, and I'm only speaking through my lens here, right? Everybody's got their own view of what this should be or can be. But I'm still discovering new ways to do it, right? So this tester application I built, this is like the 4th version of it, and I'm just starting to really like what's there. I really hated the first version. The second version was a little better. The third version was a little better, and now I'm getting to a place where, all right, I'm feeling comfortable with how it's falling out. I'm feeling comfortable with the structure that's there, and the closer I get to that, the more I'll document that kind of thing. But the more of us that are working together on it, the better this stuff's going to be. Anybody else? Awesome.
Do you think there's similar documentation for the CMS?
Of that? No.
No.
No, I don't think there is. And that's part of the thing. Like the CMS is, it's driven by users. It's fantastic. Love that, right? But the platform is really driven by developers wanting to do something a little more. And we have a different mindset when it comes to these types of things. The CMS has help pages for how you use the CMS, right? What this is kind of like help pages for how you write code. And it's a different mindset. It's a different clientele, if you will, right? So I really want us to keep building on this. We were doing this in DocBook. And it was one of those where even the guys who made it DocBook hated working in DocBook. So, like, I'm willing to concede it's a better way to document. I don't care. This is easier, and anybody can jump in and help. So
it's time to code.
Yeah. So I really think this is the path forward. Yes, sir.
Could you elaborate on the fact why you are making those controllers atomic? I mean, doesn't that produce a lot of files if you have a bigger application?
It does.
Controllers with lots of actions.
It does. I would put to you this, and when we were going through the conversation on the MVC, I basically said the same thing. In about 6 lines of code, I can give you a multitask controller. It's not a big deal if that's what you want to do, because it's very easy to just create your own like my controller and then extend it, and you've got those 6 lines of code and you're there. So that's possible, and if that's what you want to do, that's totally cool. What I've found is, from a maintainability standpoint, I actually prefer having things broken out more. I like knowing exactly where to go based on path, and like this is the one thing. If I edit this one file, then I'm not potentially changing anything else, right? And even though it's like obscure, we've had some really weird situations where you touch something and you never know, right?
Yeah, I can feel that I'm the author of the lead developer, and I can say that having atomic things, it's way to go, because we have a lot of issues coming because we are not atomic.
Yeah, well, the last piece of that puzzle.
It's just impossible to maintain technology.
The last piece of that puzzle is I'm a big believer in the principle of hierarchical MVC as well, and to do that effectively, to do it really well, you really need to have atomic things so that they can chain out, right? I don't want to instantiate 4 versions of the same class and chain them together, because God knows what might happen, right? It scares my head to even think about that. But to have them individual, I can very easily put them in there. And like in the instance of our scheduler that I was talking about, right? The fact is, all I need to know is the class name and this input. I don't need to know what method to call on it or anything like that. There's a certain simplicity to that works really well for my way of thinking. It's not to say it's the only way, but fairly easy to do. And if you search GitHub for that pull request where the MVC stuff went in, you'll find I put up gists for like 6 different ways that you might approach that. And they're all of value. They're just not. What we wanted in here was the simplistic, the most basic thing. I didn't want you to have to reinvent one of these class. I wanted you to be able to extend it, right?
That's actually a really important thing to say. Like, the problem with the old MVC was that it was incredibly prescriptive. You had to do it exactly how the CMS was expecting it to be done. So we tried to make this have as little prescription as possible. We wanted you to take it and run with it and do whatever needed to be done without having all this extra weight or code that's not useful or inappropriate for your application or so on and so forth. So the basic idea was just to make them as dumb simple as possible, and then you can build on them from there. So even like something as simple as like having a database connection isn't even the default for a model, right? We have another model that establishes a database connection.
Right.
So you take these small things and you just build and build and build on them, and you can kind of just keep, Lincoln logs, you just keep adding them up.
Also, one little nugget, please stop calling things models. Right? Please stop calling things models. Like, I wouldn't say that's a model of a chair. That's a chair. So if you have an account, like, there's no reason to have an account model. Just, it's an account. It's an account object, right? Because a model is such an abstract concept, and that's where we went with this thing. In the initial version of this MVC, I didn't even want an implementation. I wanted an interface that was JModel, and that was that, right? And the whole point of that was to say, this is a model of something. This fits into the MVC paradigm. But in actuality, a model is just a thing, right? Of all the three, that's the one that is the most sort of whatever it is that you want it to be. A controller has a very specific purpose and does a very specific thing. A view has a very specific purpose and does a very specific thing. A model does whatever the hell you want it to do because it's whatever the hell you want it to be. From a philosophical standpoint, like, I think, therefore I am, like, a model is just whatever it is you're trying to create. So let's stop with that. and we did it in 1.5 for a very specific reason, right? It was a naming convention, which was how things were loaded. But we don't have that anymore. We have an autoloader, so you can just call things by what they are, and the loader will just work.
I think you alluded in your keynote about shipping. It implied to me that there might be some UPS integration happening.
Yeah, so when I put together that slide, I went through all of the things in the last, how many years have I been involved? 6, 7 years of code that I've written and forgot about, like just sort of like blah, right? And that was one of them, right? Because I used to work on an e-commerce solution that hooked into an existing back end, and one of the things that we had to do obviously was process payments. And the other thing we had to do was figure out shipping times and shipping prices. So we hooked into UPS or FedEx or whatever the hell it was at the time, right? And I don't even know if that code would work anymore. One, because it was written probably on the order of 4 or 5 years ago, and two, because probably UPS has changed the way they do business. But the point of the slide was to say, if we've got even 5 people that are implementing that, we're doing it wrong, right? We need to work together on those things. Like, if you've got something very magical and specific about the way that you present shipping options to a seller, that's fine. But you're ultimately getting that data from the same damn place. And you're ultimately getting it in the same damn way. So I think we can all agree that underneath, like the lowest level thing, we need to find some commonality. And it'll be less buggy. You'll have to do less work. And you'll get to focus on that thing, that little figment of thing that makes yours better than everybody else's. Yes, sir.
We spoke about this on the payment side. At the last 2 daemons with some people, we all agreed that a solution was needed. In that case, with the CMS, but the platform is definitely the best way to go. So where can we go now to start working?
So you do not have to start from where I started.
No, I mean, just agree on a place, like a common repository or a common organization or whatever on GitHub?
So you don't even have to do that. It's fine. You can create your own fork, and you guys create an organization that want to work on it, rock and roll. That's awesome. I'm fully supportive of that. But you don't have to. You can just know the people you're working with, talk, and share branches, right? So I have a branch called Commerce, where yeah. So there's lots of different ways to solve this, clearly, right? But I have a payment processor class. I have a payment card class, a processor response class, and then I've got authorized PayPal Direct and PayPal Express, right? So, you know, I did this code a long time ago. It still works. The API is still kind of the same. It's fairly basic, but it gets the job done. It doesn't do anything overly fancy, but that's the whole point. The low-level stuff needs to just get the job done. Anything you want to do extra on that, that's your little bit. That's what separates you from everybody else. But underneath that, I think we have a lot of opportunity to work together and do things smarter. And with the CMS, that's just obviously not a possibility, right? It's just not what the CMS is there for. Answer your question? Awesome. And please, if you want to jump in on that and lead that effort, or somebody you know wants to lead that effort.
My point is we need to go to a single definite library for payment.
Mm-hmm.
So what I usually search for is the mother repository in which all the changes from the people on the payment library are going to see this is the alpha version, the
sure.
beta version. So if just someone can be me or you or whatever.
It could be you.
Yeah. Just I mean something more official, you know.
So I hear what you're saying, and I would challenge you to say no, it does not. What Kyle did wasn't official, at least in the beginning. What happened is he built a consensus around it. So if you started off and you say, my branch here is the payment branch, and please come work with me, and you post on the list and you get other people excited about it, it will become the de facto standard. It will become the official thing. And when you're done, you send a pull request to the platform, we negotiate, back and forth, and it gets merged in, right? I want to see this happen as much as anybody else. I have limited time to work on it, right? But it doesn't have to be my code. I don't care. So long as it's good code, it works, it's unit tested, and it fits with style, right? And yeah, and with documentation, right? Extend the manual. Explain how you use it. And the more people you get involved in it, the better off it's going to be. But you be the change that you want to see. Be the improvements that you want to see. It's so important for people just, if this is my idea, take ownership. I wanted SSL on the core. They sucked me into this thing for like 7 years. I'm still here and I don't understand why. Be that guy. I think I'm pretty much out of time. But I implore you all, please get involved. Please help out. The documentation, if nothing else, would be hugely useful. Even if you don't feel like you're able or willing to write the code that goes into this thing, use it a little bit. Make a suggestion, send a pull request. A spelling mistake, God knows, we've got pedants in this room who hammer me about spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes. So now I'm at the point where I use the wrong grammar just to mess it up. No names. No names. So.
Thank you, Louis.
Absolutely. Thank you all.